Woo!
Hello.
I mean, your mind.
Hello.
Wow.
I'll try it now. Oh, there we go. Hey. There we go. Okay. Well, welcome to the class, of course. Let me guess. Does anybody want to guess what I'm going to say next? Come on. Turn off your phones. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, I'm always cranky. I'm particularly cranky today, though, just so you know. All right, the most important thing on this sheet today is really, this is actually last week's sheet, just so you know, is that this is in regard, I'm going to remind you all again that Tiger Giving Day is February 19th. We have a couple of things we're looking to get. We're trying to get to $10,000. Very important that we begin to make the Sunny Slope Annex ADA accessible, so we can basically begin to use that for classes. And also, those of you that have been over there may be aware that the Sunny Slope Annex, or formerly the Witten property, has a really huge porch. And it would be a great place for people in good weather, of course. It's a screened-in porch for people to socialize and to, hang around between classes, perhaps have lunch. So it's really got a lot of benefits as a property. So we really need to work on getting enough finances to get that thing up and running. And the university basically is kind of the way it's going to work out is they're going to match our funds until we get enough money to make it ADA compliant. So please give your best to Tiger Giving Day for Ollie. That would be greatly appreciated, as I am on the development committee, and it's certainly something that I try to work on a little bit. So appreciate that, and hopefully you will be generous this time around. Well, I come to you today with a heavy heart. No, I'm actually serious. I really am. It's interesting that like an elevator operator or a full-service gas station attendant, that indeed I have been replaced by technology. So there will no longer be, after next week, any more announcements at classes. And you will be expected, like self-service gas stations, to indeed have self-service by reading the weekly digest that comes out on your email. So as of today, 54% of you do read the weekly digest on email. And so the rest of you, if you really want to know what's going on at Ollie, you're going to have to read the weekly digest. So again, that means that I will no longer need to be giving you these announcements. Well, what I can guarantee I will do moving forward is I will still be here. I will make sure that you get your 4.5-minute break that you are so generously given by our beloved fearless leader. And I will make sure also that anyone that's cell phone goes off will be punished. So that will not change. But it is a little bit that I will no longer be doing this introduction quite the way we have been doing it today. So I'll leave you with a quote today, and periodically I will come up here if there's something important to talk about. I will, and I'll probably try to write a joke too, just because it's really difficult for me to leave this class without ever singing "Springtime for Hitler." So I'm serious. I really wanted to do it, but it really wouldn't be quite what I wanted to do today. So I will leave you with a quote, or actually not a quote, a version of a very famous phrase from one of my favorite, if not my most favorite, person in history from this time frame, and that's Winston Churchill. And It'll go something like this. Never in the course of Ali learning has so much been owed by so many to one professor. I give you Dr. Joseph Kicklighter.
Thank you, thank you. Well, to get brought up in the same sentence as Winston Churchill is pretty heady, let's put it that way. But someone in the back said he could be my twin. But I'm taller than he was, so there. So I was never that good looking, but today we start with Austria, and those of you who have been to Austria will know what a beautiful country it is. And I thought, it's interesting, isn't it, that Austria, as we know it, really didn't exist before World War I. It, of course, was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and being German, had its origins way back in my day, in the Middle Ages, as part of Germanic territories. All of this to say is the existence of Austria as its own entity started off very, very roughly. It is between, of course, two very, shall we say, lusty neighbors. On the one hand, Germany, and on the other hand, Italy. And Austria was very small, in fact, so small that many Austrians wanted to be part of Germany because, of course, they were ethnically German. But, of course, the peacemakers would have none of it. You were part of the losers, and so you're certainly now not going to be united with Germany, another loser. All of this then, without Hungary, without the Czechs, Slovaks, and others, you just are going to have to make it on your own as a single state. And it was by no means easy. Now, in the 1920s, they did all right. We're picking up the story in the 1930s. I think it's fair to say that Austria developed a parliamentary system with a president and a premier and all the rest of it. However, we all understand that Austria, like much of Europe, in fact virtually all of Europe, was adversely affected by the Great Depression. And Austria, with, I suspect, great financial institutions in Vienna, was even worse hit. All of this is to say that socialists, communists, fascists, all extremist groups had a heyday by the 1930s in Austria. Every kind of extremist group you can imagine. And that brings in the subject of Engelbert, not Humperdinck, but Dollfuss. That's called preemption, just in case you tried to do it. Dollfuss was an interesting figure. He was an attorney, devoutly Catholic, and devoted to Austria in a right-wing conservative way. In other words, you say, well, I might be a little liberal, then his skin would begin to crawl. It's like, if you said, well, I'm really kind of pinkish, then it's really, the rash begins. Don't even think about the communists. Dollfuss then formed a strong coalition of right-wing groups, and more or less there in Austria, Vienna, was able to say, down with socialists, down with liberals, down with communists, and all of you just keep quiet. It's a new day for Austria. In other words, he's the strong man. He hangs out with Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini was not a good Catholic by any means. If the man ever set foot in Mass, it would be by mistake, I would think. I mean, fascism and Catholicism are not necessarily compatible if you take your beliefs serious, and Dollfuss did. However, he wanted Austria to be Austrian, and I guess he saw friendship with Italy to be the best way for Austria to survive in these very, very difficult times. Now you say, but socialism is the way. Keep your mouth shut, okay? In other words, but I thought we had freedom of speech. Well, you did, but we pretty much don't need any of that anymore. So, despite having this nice, angelic face, Dollfuss could be a real tiger as far as individual liberties, or I'm running on the liberal ticket, or that kind of thing. He had no use for that. But I'll tell you another gang he had no use for, and those are called Nazis. Yes, he was very anti-Nazi. Here they are. Got his walking stick and his gloves all done up, just right out of Brooks Brothers. And there he is with Il Duce in civvies, you'll notice. And they are there. I imagine Dollfuss spent a lot of time in Rome. I know his wife did, with the Mussolini family. It's very interesting. I mean, it's sort of like this Austrian-Italian relationship became very significant because, let's face it, by this period, the Germans are breathing down their necks. I mean, first of all, you'll get little notes from the Germans saying, we're so crazy about you. We just have these notices from the Chamber of Commerce. We would like to have more opportunities at trade. And you see, if you say yeah to one of these, then the next thing they're going to want some other kinds of opportunities, because you can't get enough. The German demands then on Austrian cooperation really can't be satisfied. So the idea is that Dollfuss has got his big buddy Benito and saying in effect to the Germans, you better watch out, or we Italians, we could hurt you. And you say, but I thought that Mussolini and Hitler had amore. Well, that's coming to a classroom near you, but it's not there yet. Right now, it's kind of hurtful. It's kind of some ugly words are being passed. Yes, there was the New York Times, July 1934. In the midst of a city, I'm sure they would love to have blamed it on wild terrorists, socialists, communists, whatnots. But in fact, they were Austrian Nazis. And I always thought, well, that's something we tell folks, like students, and then think, how do we really know that? It was in the New York Times. Yeah. So, right there, seriously, I think this must have been common knowledge. Now, does this mean that Adolf Hitler steps up and says, yeah, we really hate it that we had to kill him, but we did, and we want to admit it? No! He says, those naughty Austrian Nazis, I'm so sorry. I really regret this whole thing. But seriously, it was a major international incident. And I think nothing could have been more hypocritical than the German ambassador to Austria attending the funeral mass. I mean, that's pretty cheeky if you ask me. But basically, Hitler at this point, with Mussolini announcing that Italian troops are going to come along the Brenner Pass up there in northern Italy. And that's like, you better watch out, Hitler. The Italians may come and get you. You better be scared. And I'm sure that Hitler was quaking. But at this point, he is not willing to risk anything, even though the British and the French were going like, yeah, you tell them, that kind of thing, trying to encourage them. And you say, well, I didn't know the British and the French were that crazy about Mussolini. We're trying, we want to develop a relationship if we can. Because that's where we are in 1934. Now, poor Dollfuss, and this was in the newspapers. I'm not going to tell you. I mean, would you think in 1934 that would make the papers? I mean, because, we always grow up and think modern day is so gross and gruesome, but it could be gruesome back then. Because, I mean, this is a very well-known picture. They just stuck him there on the sofa and left him. Right there in the executive building there in Vienna. So it was humiliating for Austria, and though Hitler denied that his government was involved, and they sent the flowers and wrote the note to Madame Dollfuss, well, he had little children. I mean, the man was young. So it was a tragedy all around, and of course, Mussolini said he was mad. And they better watch out. Those Germans better watch out. And so, the British and French say, Benito, are you as mad as we are? Maybe we ought to start talking about this and be mad together. So, let's have a meeting, yes. So there they are, Pierre Laval, representing the glorious Third Republic, which will make many of you, I'm sure, you're going, oh, I love you, Third Republic. Well, maybe not, but anyway, we're going, this guy would be on the Rogues Gallery, Pierre Laval. I'm just saying. And he's right next to, of course, Il Duce. And then, bless his heart, I always say that about folks, Ramsay MacDonald, who should have retired. Yeah, he should long ago have been retired. But he was hanging in there. You see, 1935, he is still running the government, even though he's been disowned by most of the Labor government because he formed a coalition government with some of those conservatives. Yeah. He'd been kicked out of the Labor Party. It's embarrassing. But he figures at the same time, I'll hang out with Pierre and Benito, and we'll have fun at Stresa. And there, of course, there's going to be a lot of what I would call posturing. You better watch out. We love our Austria. You Germans, you come near Austria, we're going to kick you know what. You know, that sort of thing. This is known as the Stresa front. We're forming this front. And of course, Stresa, which you're going to see in a moment, well, at least the photograph of it, I'll count on you to take the Delta flight, and they'll be available for you to go see it. But it was true that, I mean, the idea was we're going to have this united front, and you just wonder what was in their mind. I would assume that Britain and France were trying to woo Italy, and the Italians are kind of like, how bad do you want us? Because you think, well, maybe not as much as you want, because the Italians had not done as well in the Great War as they thought they did. And so the Italians were still mad about the Great War, and Mussolini thought, they need me. And so, since they need me so badly, let the British and French beg. Certainly, it is nothing to say that Mussolini was not interested in the cause of world peace. If you are concerned about whether he got the Nobel Prize, he didn't. So, just pointing out that this whole Stresa front business was simply a way for him to try to see how far he could go in terms of concessions from Britain and France. I think at this point, as we're going to see, he was weighing his options. But of course, the British and the French were thinking, now remember we are 1935, thinking how far or what will we have to do to keep the Germans under control? Remember, the Germans aren't in the League of Nations anymore. I mean, as if that was an effective institution. But there is still the thought that we, Big Three, can somehow work together against Hitler. I know. I have not paid anything for my endorsement of Stresa. But I'm just saying, in case you've seen Panama City enough, maybe this would be a nice option. I saw this and I think, God, I want to go to a great conference. You know, I don't care what you want to have it for. I'll do what I think these places are gorgeous, but they would never meet anybody, you know, like Beauregard or Silicon. I mean, they go to somewhere like this. You think they're talking about the Third Reich all the time? I'm not sure about that. I just thought it was gorgeous. But that's Stresa, and he was meeting there with Ramsay MacDonald. That is, he being Mussolini meeting there. And, of course, so many people's French favorite, Pierre Laval, who has an interesting future. I'll call it interesting. Lots of other words I could use. The Stresa Front is a short production, so if you do want to impress friends and family, drop this at a party and say, how much do you really know about the Stresa Front? Then you start in. They will gasp with admiration at your knowledge. Not that many know. Yep, great big flop. I would say if you made it through the summer of 1935, it's like this gasp of the last efforts to maintain some sort of united front of this coalition of three against Germany and say, now it's got to stop. Austria has a right to its own independent existence. And of course, having Mussolini as an ally proved to be unacceptable. I'm not sure you say, gosh, well, Italy's nice, but how about the Soviet Union? No, Big Red, we are not ready for that. Ally with commies? What are you thinking of? Wait just a minute. How desperate do you think we are? Well, we're about to see. Because we know you can get the next one. Well, maybe I just don't have sense enough to know. What we do know is that clearly, okay, well, I'll just go on and talk and then they can, got it? We understand that this period of 1935 onward is dealing in a whole new world, and we think back to, say, 33, 34, right around in there, and realize maybe most people just thought of what was going on in Berlin and Hitler. This is temporary. German governments come and go. Golly, before Hitler came in, there were 3 or 4 in a row almost. So in fact, as is the case with many cabinet governments, in fact, to have long-lasting authority in a parliamentary regime is highly unusual. But all of this then is to say that during Hitler's first years, 1933, 1934, people wait thinking something's going to change. He can't possibly survive. And finally, there's an acceptance. In case you don't recognize him, let me remind you, David Lloyd George, everybody's favorite Welshman. Yes, Lord George, the Prime Minister of Britain during the second half of the Great War. And you're like, what's a nice guy like that doing in a place like this? Well, I've really read a lot about it, and I think, he's the kind of British fellow who says, well, we're British, so we would certainly never have someone like that in a leadership role, but the Germans are just crazy about him, and he seems to be doing real well. He's gotten them back to work, and the economy's just humming along, and yes, it's unfortunate, some of his policies, but all in all, we just have to get about our business. So, he actually went to Germany, and during the course of that visit, it was already set up, prearranged, called on Hitler twice for little visits, and much of it was staged. Of course, there was criticism, but I think why I wanted to mention it to you is that now you have someone who is not an ambassador, because, they're supposed to be doing this for a living. They might have to shake hands or do the things that you do because they get a check every month. And dental, your dental and the medical benefit. But Lloyd George, he's retired. He lived until 1945, so he was a long liver. And in many, I would say, circles, he was highly respected. Oh, he was a tiger after the Great War. Some of you will remember how he campaigned with, I will squeeze the German pips until they, what's the rest of the expression? Till they squeak. And I'll hang the Kaiser. Oh, yes, they were very bellicose. And you say, how could now he become, to use a word from our youth, mellow? I think it's because he felt in some way that this was going to ease the German situation. The Germans would be happy under Hitler, not all Germans, but enough Germans that gradually Germany could be a part of the world, and there need be no further wars. We just had to learn to work with him. We might not want him to be our leader, but they seem to be fine with it, these Germans. That's my thinking of what is going on here, because otherwise it just really does seem wrong. Because I do not think in any way, and this is not always true of people, British people or even Americans, who go and say, oh, I'd like to hang out with Hitler. Some of them may, really liked him. I don't think that was the case of Lloyd George. I think this is just a pragmatic issue for him. And when you read what Lloyd George said about this, it just really astounds you to think that this individual, who presumably was very wise and knew a lot about world affairs, would now deal with him. And this is 1936, so you think about it, we're only 3 years away from the war. So a lot of change is coming. You notice he is receiving him, that is to say the Fuhrer, in civilian clothes, which I think is interesting. I always wonder when he and his wardrobe assistants decide what he's going to wear at any particular occasion, and they might have just suggested, you just go as a civilian today, Fuhrer. And he said, oh, you really, do I have to? Okay. Because, bummer, because I love my uniforms and my medals and my boots and all that. But I just think for the purpose of dealing with the British, let's just look like we're just one of them. He said, okay. Meanwhile, the Italians, they're going to get a lot of attention. You say, but why? Well, they want a lot of attention. and they try to get a lot of attention. And yes, we are speaking of Il Duce. He becomes the face of Italy. I mean, the man was in power from 1922 to 1943. It's a long time. And during those years, he tried, as many do, to make the role of what would be, I don't want to say minor power, but let's just say, what did Winston Churchill say about, or maybe it was Bismarck, said about the Italians? They have such big eyes but such a poor appetite, meaning they want to get so much, but they just can't get it down. You know, it's kind of like going to Morrison's when we were children, and then you got too much, and then you couldn't eat it all. That's the idea with the Italians. The Italians had the notion of being, yeah, we're one of them. We're like Germany and Britain, yeah. And so I don't know how seriously the others took them, but somehow he persuaded the British, the French, and the Germans to agree to the so-called Four-Power Pact. Again, try this out at a party and see how many of your friends can say, oh, yes, I know all about that Four-Power Pact. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. Come and tell your own stories about these experiences. Because if you do, I'd like to collect them in maybe a book of people who know about the Four-Power Pact. This is not a detail of history that is well known. Yeah, oh, one. One will do nicely, thank you, yes. There are not many who know about the Four-Power Pact. Well, they sign it, and basically, and it has all the origins of saying, we will work together for international peace. And again, it's Il Duce who recommends it. But I decided to do more digging, since actually this was kind of a dud. Yes, there he is, up close and personal, in uniform too. And you say, where does this article come from? Well, it comes from a famous magazine. It died in 1938. It's always sad when magazines die. Some of us remember Collier's, Saturday Evening Post, Woman's Home Companion. Remember all the magazines your mother had? They're gone. This one was called The Literary Digest. And you say, I think I have heard of that. Yes, there was a presidential election in 1936. And Literary Digest, by all the polls, declared the winner of the 1936 presidential election in the United States would be Alf Landon. He would sweep FDR out of office. People said, I want extra copies. This is news. The great corn-husking governor of Kansas will be our new president. You say, but wait, this is a revision of American history as I thought I knew it. Yes, it didn't happen. And we say goodbye to Literary Digest. It had a glorious history, late 19th century, and then a funny thing happened during the 20th century. Yes, but that's the truth. Literary Digest was a big deal. Now, I have read this, and with my eyes, with glasses, I can tell you it is very journalistic in content. Signed in Rome. The agreement provided for 10 years of peace and cooperation. And it goes on to say that he used to saber rattle and so forth, this powerfully built, massive-jawed man, etc. The war chapter is closed. It needs collaboration, especially from the United States. Warning against imbecile optimism, he declared the pact, if ratified, would be a firm basis for the settlement of questions between Italy and Germany. And it ends, this article, strictly speaking, said the Rome correspondent of the Associated Press, it presents little that is new. Well, I mean, it's just the same old, but, you know, give peace a chance, and we all have a hug. And, you know, but it's interesting to think about that it was serious enough that AP personnel would have been on the scene. Well, Iluce, what are your thoughts on this? And, you know, he would never miss a chance to get to talk, so he probably ran his mouth and babbled on. And the man was a polyglot. He spoke English and French and German, and so Mussolini would tell him just what he thought. And you say, gee, was he trying to take center stage? Oh, I think so. All of this, then, is to say the Four-Power Pact is yet another instance of Italy trying to play a major role, and the Germans, as yet, under Hitler, not willing to do anything about it. Meanwhile, Germany had more important issues, if I may say, than worrying about Mussolini running his mouth about Austria. And that, of course, has to do with Poland. We've brought up Poland many times in this class, and we've understood the struggles of Poland, the Friends of Poland committees in the United States, large Polish communities in Chicago, yeah, and in other great places. And we understand their significance in elections. The Polish lobby, shall we say, was very strong. Poland's existence was something of, depending on your point of view, a miracle or a nightmare. I think if you were Germany, you see the problem. There is Poland, and there is that beautiful kind of tannish country called Czechoslovakia. You say, well, aren't they new kids on the block? Well, in some way. Does that make them warm and friendly and loving? No, it does not. There are some hurt feelings on both sides. And there's going to be more hurt feelings coming to a classroom near you. Don't you worry. But we'll save that. Oh, speaking of hurt feelings, then there's Hungary. They've got some hurt feelings. But in this case, we're more concerned with seeing that Polish corridor. I guess you can see that land. And the interesting questions about a mixed German-Polish population. And you're saying, I guess they were, howdy neighbor. So, we love that sausage. Y'all come on over. And oh, yeah. Love my Polish friends. Not so much. Anyway, it just gets worse. Also, let's not forget Danzig, because they certainly didn't, so we won't either. Danzig, which is a very significant port town in Poland today, was, at that time, a major German city. But the peacemakers in the Great War, and with a lot of Polish lobbying, decided that there must be, for the Poles, a major port city. Danzig then, while under the supervision of the League of Nations, was to be an open city available for German and Polish shipping. So, was that enough of a problem? Well, there were lots of other issues, because if the Poles said, sometimes we really don't like the Germans. I mean, we don't dislike them, we really hate them. And the Germans, of course, hate them. It's a mutual thing. So you say, well, since you hate them so much, why don't you look east and maybe you'll find somebody you want to love? You say, not thinking this would be a romance that we could really think about. We just don't like Russians. It's been a long-standing hatred. It wasn't yesterday. It's been going on for quite some time. And B, they're communists, hard reds, not soft reds, hard reds. And we don't want anything to do with them. For some reason, all of this is going to lead to quite a move on the part of Nazi envoys, Germans. They're going to say, you know, we've had some misunderstandings with you Poles, and yet we have some warm feelings about you. Do you think we could be pals and maybe hang out? I cannot imagine how they phrase this. But somehow, in downtown Warsaw, the Germans and Poles signed a non-aggression pact. We don't want to hurt you, you big Pole. We really like you. You have a lot going for you. So, yeah, I mean, it just, you think of the utter hypocrisy of some of this stuff. It really is fascinating. Yes, and it comes with a shot of the Polish-German love fest. Now, who is this gang of worthies? Oh, my Lord. You notice the ambassador from Germany, and the name, gosh, it sounds familiar. Von Moltke. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, he's not just a regular guy from, just hung out. No, he comes from one of the big families. And there's El Presidente, otherwise known as Pilsudski. And there is, of course, everybody's favorite propaganda minister, Goebbels. And finally, the Polish number 2 man, Colonel Beck, who will die in a German facility in 1944. But they're all gathered now in beautiful palace there in Warsaw. And you're thinking, I wonder if this was a happy time. Do they look happy? Hugs all around. I know they're kind of like, don't touch me, don't come near me. No more sausage for you. Yeah, it's just basically a non-aggression pact, which means, in effect, it's not an alliance. We'll go anywhere with you, you Pole. No, it means we're not going to attack you. Are you going to attack us? No, 9. We are just going to hang out. Well, for 10 years maybe. Then we'll have the right to decide whether we want to renew or whether all the love is gone, or, you know. So that's very funny, though, and you think, why do they have this relationship? I think a lot has to do with the anti-Soviet. And when the Poles bring up the subject of, are you sure that we can count on you? And then the Germans will say to the Polish representative, what would you prefer, communist? And they say, oh, when you put it that way, you're looking better all the time. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's really funny how that works. So, this relationship, you say, is it going to last? Is the love that they share in 1934 going to be one that will be till death do them part? I think not.
Death will come.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a short relationship. Not as short, however, as the break you will now enjoy. You have 4.5 minutes. All right. Just to remind you again, this idea of having a German-Polish non-aggression pact will seem very strange in light of future events. And when you think about this term covering 2 or 3 years, you will understand why when you think about how long it is before World War II. It just 5 years. But that's how slow in some ways events occur, because as we will talk about, the historians still debate, was all of this planned, or was it just a matter of events occurring and people taking advantage of them? But this German-Polish non-aggression pact is, as they would say, one for the books, because it definitely is strange. And speaking of strange, here's one that also creates an odd couple in a bed. We are talking the Franco-Soviet alliance, and they said it couldn't be done. Well, that's why we have diplomats, yes, who got nice trips to Stresa and other great places. In this case, maybe not so nice. We are talking about Moscow, no offense to those of Russian heritage. But we understand that off goes the ever oily Pierre Laval to Moscow to talk it over with his counterpart, Litvinov. Some of you will remember from last time our discussions of Litvinov, who has got an interesting future ahead as ambassador to the League of Nations, as ambassador to the United States during the Second World War. And best of all, in 1951, he got to die in his bed. And that was so nice, because the man that we just call him Uncle Joe, a sign of love, didn't do anything with him. So he got to die in bed, so that was nice. But that's Litvinov, and Laval decides, particularly I think after the German-Polish non-aggression pact, maybe we can do it. You know, Litvinov talked about collective security. That was his favorite phrase, collective security. We've all got to come together. He used to make speeches at the League of Nations. We must all work together for peace and all of that. So I guess the French decided to put him in his word. Now, those of you who know any of the French will know that these are not folks who just go, well, if you think that's a good idea, let's all just get behind it. No, 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 no. Lord, they were screaming and fussing and carrying on quite a bit. You want to make a treaty with communists? You'll notice, do you see anybody there having a cup of tea and crumpets? No, no. You Frenchies, you're on it by yourselves. We do not want to touch any Bolshevik hands. So the French and the Soviets form an alliance, and I can't begin to tell you the controversy and in the political scheme of things, how controversial this was. For the purpose of the Soviets, I see it clearly that it was useful to them, thinking maybe this would somehow get Hitler and go, gosh, I'm really nervous now. The French and the Soviets come together, wow. Whatever the case, it appears that how was this going to work? Because as we are building in the numbers of relationships and alliances, you must be thinking there are people from Warsaw in the back room. And the Laval is saying to Litvinov, hey, I want you to meet some of my Polish friends. I wanted them to come and we could all hang out together. No! Oh, I know. It would be nice. I know, dreams of love and caring, working together. But it didn't work that way. Because in many cases, the big question is going to be if a certain power, it's got 2 syllables, starts with a G. I wonder what, if a certain power should get out of hand, how will we both take care of it? Well, see, that will be the problem, because the Poles and the Soviets just couldn't come together. Oh, remember the Poles and the French. They already have a relationship. That's not a problem there. The question is, though, the Soviets. So, at least at this point, 1935, Litvinov can bring to his boss, Big Bad Joe Stalin, and say, I've got a deal with the French. And as far as the people in Paris are concerned, some like it and some do not like it. But the British have their own issues. The individual that you see in the middle there looking all gutsied up and happy was concluding a term as ambassador to Great Britain. His name, von Ribbentrop, one of those who would be hanged at Nuremberg in 1946, was, the nicest word I can think for him is he was a Hitler's toady. He liked to say, yeah, if the Fuhrer says something. Believe it or not, a friend of mine actually wrote about his term just as ambassador to Great Britain. You say, wow, a whole work on that? We can get some very little areas to cover in history, believe me. And we can make it a lot longer if we really work at it. Von Ribbentrop's term as ambassador to Great Britain began when he was presented to the English king, or should I say British king. And you're going to say, well, I guess he bowed and said some nice things like, greetings from our leaders. No, he gave him the Nazi salute. And you can only imagine the British press, everybody, just not good, just not good. But he did, with those heels clicking, sounds like something, you know, like, Heil Hitler to the King of Britain, George, and people, it was not good, okay? So if you're talking about Anglo-German relations, it hurt. It hurt a lot. But other than faux pas of that kind, the British were interested in some kind of working relationship, albeit a strange one in that clearly the Germans had decided that Treaty of Versailles, it was a loser anyway. So we've decided to tear it up. So the British are going to say, oh, well, if you decide then you don't like it, could we have another agreement? Please, please, pretty please. That's what this is. Anglo-German naval agreement. Were there any calls to Paris? No. They can run around with communists, then we'll have agreements with Germans. So take that, you losers. Yes, is there some hurt between the British and the French? I think so. But basically, this business of allowing the German Navy and determining its size and dimensions will be, I would say, if you want to say the end of any pretense of following the agreements after World War I, you've really reached it. If you need anything else, it was the announcement of the German Air Force. And you're going to go like, I wonder if the British and French said, no, you didn't do that, did you? That's so naughty. You ought to be ashamed. I feel like they probably had an idea. It's sort of like when you say to folks, you know, they say, we've been going out or we've been doing such and such. You say, oh, really? But you knew that. We've been knowing that the Germans have been in violation for years. But it's like they didn't do it right in your face. And now the British decide, okay, let's make a deal of it. So this goon basically makes an agreement, making it official. The Anglo-German Naval Agreement. And it will become very important. I mean, obviously, the British and French, they're hurt. They're hurting. You know, yeah. Oh, love is really gone. But I mean, it's that sort of thing. Does love become hate? I don't know. Sometime they will reach out to each other once again. The vicissitudes of amore. But yes, the British and the French have a hard time. And the Germans are going like, wow, we are hot. We are really doing well. And my master, Adolf, you didn't call him Adolf, believe me. Fuhrer, so smart, so wonderful. Love to kiss his cheeks. So, there we have it, but I just love that picture and the idea of he must have thought, von Ribbentrop, that he was just just to catch me out. You know, he just thought he was so clever, so smart. And he would go on, of course, to be Chief of Foreign Relations. And we're going, oh yes, and we're going to meet him again, believe you me. It's sort of hard to get rid of him until 1946. So yeah, he's got a lot to answer for. Now, of course, most of us know about the decision of Hitler, and this is one of those dates that I know all people who've earned scholarly awards and who want to continue going in the light of righteousness, scholarly righteousness, will know that next week when I mention March 7th, 1936, she will say, "Oh, please, may I?" And you will be permitted to recite, and the others will listen with admiration, nay, envy, at your brilliance. This date, though, seriously, was the one that some scholars have said, and I always put in those phrases because don't you always wonder why someone will come up with this kind of commandment? And this is the last moment that Britain and France could have stopped Germany. So that doesn't make it dramatic. March 7th, 1936, the troops marching in. And do you see anybody say it? Indeed not. They're cheering, they're thrilled. They've been waiting for this day, those people of the Rhinelanders. These are German people. And the idea is, and you see the area right in the west, that is an area that had been demilitarized, many of you will recall from previous courses, and you'll be aware of the significance of the Rhineland being so close to France. But at the same time, a humiliation for Germany in that by following the treaty, it was maintained without German troops and often occupied, you'll recall, by Belgians and French so that they could collect their reparations. All of this is to say that what if on March the 8th, 1936, British and French forces had suddenly marched in? You say, well, couldn't the League of Nations spank the Germans? Well, the Germans not a member anymore, so what are you going to do? Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess if the British and French had been willing to do something, it could have been done. I'm not saying that it would necessarily have been effective, but as it was, there was nothing done. It basically like, well, it is German land, and the people of the Rhineland really want this. So let's just let it go and let's move on. So 1936, as far as people, and you see all of you look at the little boys and children, you ask yourselves again, how important is this really? Well, I don't know. I mean, it's just something we all have to consider. It is major, it's certainly in German history, and and of course Hitler was overjoyed. And it's not that the British and French said, oh, well, this is great, this is wonderful, we're so pleased for you. I don't think it's that either. It's just they're not going to do anything about it. So more or less, The remilitarization of the Rhineland brings confidence to Adolf Hitler, so some say. Was it planned? Well, I guess it was. I guess if you're going to move a massive force of troops into an area, it has to be planned. But it was done early in the morning and sort of presented to the world, probably over BBC, as a fait accompli. The troops are there, now what are you going to do about it? You French, you Belgians, you got something to say? You got a problem with it? You know, it's that kind of thing. So it's a very interesting situation. March 7th, 1936. Thank you. Oh, now. Yeah. I just want to pull out the greatest hits of the Carpenters and start singing to you about We've Only Just Begun. But little did they know, believe me, Harry and Meghan have nothing on these two. So don't you worry. You are looking to your right at what I would call an international playboy. Yes, he had lots of female friends, okay? This is only the last one. One of them was actually Gloria Vanderbilt's sister. You want small facts? I can give you small facts. That's very small. Her name was Thelma Funches. And Thelma Funches was an American, of course, and she had to go to the United States, and she called her friend, Wallace Simpson. She said, I've got to make this trip over to the States. Could you look after David while I'm gone? And Mrs. Simpson said, that could be done. I'll be glad to help. Oh, she helped herself plenty. When Thelma got back to Great Britain, she didn't have a boyfriend anymore. Yes, you heard it here first. That is the ugly, ugly truth.
Did that dress start a fashion trend by any chance?
Oh. I just look at the little hat. I think it's got a kind of coordination, don't you? I don't know a lot about women's clothes, but that's an interesting point. But in any event, I'm wondering about, and I know we all worry about, what was really going on in 1936 in the mind of the typical British person. This! You think, are they worried about the Rhineland? You worry, I worry. Those of us who want to do well in school, who want to make A's, will worry about the Rhineland. But the British public was all about Edward VIII and Mrs. Simpson and their tawdry goings-on. Yes. Lurid is another word that comes to mind. Yes. Were they living in sin? Maybe. And she was a divorcee. So, there's some goings on, folks. All of this made 1936 exciting. You would rush off the subway to get your copy of The Sun to find the latest doings of David and Wallace as she was getting through her second divorce. I will not pursue the tawdry details to let you know about the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. The story of them will come in a subsequent chapter. You'll have to wait. All you need to know is now that in 1936, when you and I would think about the Rhineland, these two, and that's just the way people are. And you think, it's just 2020. No, it isn't. This was 1936, and that same kind of interest in things that are tawdry, nay, unspoken. Yes. So, but we'll think about Poland and Germany and non-aggression pacts and not worry. And I'm glad that Alan pointed out the fashion statement that was being made, because now that's all I can think of when I see that. And I wish I hadn't, yes, I wish I had. I'm very, very sorry. Well, now you see the bright young man of Italian fascism. Yes, Mussolini's son-in-law. Is it hard to be a son-in-law? Sometimes it is. Sometimes I'm sure it can be very rewarding. In the case of Count Chano, I think it was both. The relationship would end sadly when Count Chano was executed in 1943, so I think that's sad. But these are the good times. When he was foreign minister, luckily we have his diaries, so sort of like emails or something like that, so you can read what he was really thinking. Anyway, it's very interesting, this idea of Germans and Italians coming together. And believe me, this is going to take some diplomatic maneuvering. Because you think, but they've hurt each other so much. Can we still find true love together? And Chano and Ribbentrop, remember him? Yes, those two, who utterly loathed each other. Did I say detested? Maybe I said abhorred. There's so many words for their feelings. But that will give you, I think that will start us. Detesting, all of this is to say that Count Chano, with the blessings of Mussolini, will propose what will be known for many years in the future as the Axis. You know, we think about the Allies. Well, here are the Axis. We are tomorrow. We are the 20th century. We're hot. We're coming. We are so much better than those commie losers or those Western liberal democracies. Yuck. And we are fascists and we're proud. We're the big F. That is Italy and Germany. The Rome-Berlin axis. And, as you notice, they're going to get a new friend in 1940. This relationship, it doesn't start out fast. We have to build. Because at first we loved China, but they got over it. It cooled. And they reached out to Japan, because you can't have them both. Yeah, you know. So it will be, you got to make up your mind though, Rome, Berlin, Tokyo axis. And it all goes back to this fellow who was the son-in-law of Mussolini and foreign minister and adulterer. I mean, he has many titles, but suffice it to say that this will be one of the most important aspects of those later 1930s. A decision, I don't know if Chano and Mussolini by 1943 would have said, you know, that was a wonderful thing we did, deciding to become a great German friend. Maybe that didn't work out just like we had planned. But in fact, yes, sir.
What was Japan's motivation in joining them in 1940?
Well, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that they were looking for support from the Italians and the Germans in Europe. In other words, China was, of course, a major member of the League of Nations, and I suspect that by that point, you know, the Japanese were out. So I think this was the fact of three who were out of thinking, but we're together and we will hang tough against China, Britain, and the other losers. That kind of thing. We're big and we're bad. We're the Axis. So that kind of
They
thing.
didn't like the Soviets very much either.
No, that was, yes. There are many, many things that we have in common. If we work at it, we got to work, you know, with your friendships. That's the way it is sometimes. You have to really work at it. And trying not to think about Mrs. Simpson's dress. I will see you all next week. Please come back. I'll look forward to seeing you then.